So there is a change going on.
Oh, there's tremendous change going on, and you know what you said about politicians. Politicians are now getting on board on this. We have, you know, our state legislators. Of course, we got 50 states, and each state has their state legislators, and they have a thing called the caucus of black state legislators, African American folks. About 3 years ago, that caucus came together and passed a resolution calling for an end to the war on drugs. Treat drug abuse as a health problem. That's all we want. Treat it as a health problem, not a crime problem. A year later, the National Caucus of Latino State Legislators passed the same resolution. And a year after that, 225 mayors from the largest cities in the United States came together at the National Mayors Conference, and they passed the same resolution unanimously. End the war on drugs. Treat drug abuse as a health problem. So you see, politicians are coming around. They are understanding.
One could also maybe think that the change in government in the United States, the change in administration, the new Obama administration, maybe have a different look on these things.
Not likely. No, we'll have to force the issue. Every president since Nixon, who was a Republican, but every president since him, whether Republican or Democrat, has made the situation worse than it was when they went into office. So it's a completely nonpartisan disaster.
But what is the power that drives them to do this? I mean, why do they keep going down this road? They must know by now, what you know, that it doesn't work.
Think of the money that's behind this. There's tremendous amounts of money involved in this. Just, excuse me, let me have a little sip of water here. Just think about, I'm not even talking about corruption. Think about how much money is spent Think about how much money is spent by the United States in 1 year to fight the war on drugs. It is $70 billion. That's a lot of money.
70 billion?
That's right. $70 billion is spent, and almost all of that money goes into the coffers of police departments, law enforcement. That's a lot to give up. If you ask any police department, any administrator there, they'll tell you that about 20% of their entire budget can be traced directly back to the war on drugs. Now that's a lot to ask an administrator to give up, right? So
that is going to be a problem, yeah.
Well, we're going to have to force the issue, and the only way we can force the issue is we get a huge grassroots organization, a movement to do this. And we believe the proper movement is LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. We want, in the next 2 years, to make this an organization of over 1 million people. And if we do that, then after the next presidential election, right now we're gathering the names of all these politicians that you mentioned that might be on our side, and there's a lot of them. And we're telling them, we're not going to release your name, we're going to hold on to it, but in 2 years we're going to come back to you with such a huge organization that we can show you, you won't lose one more vote than you gain if you support these policies of ending drug prohibition. And if we show them that, I think they will end this thing, because it is an absolute disaster. And we know from looking around the world that if we legalize and regulate drugs, we can reduce death, disease, crime, and drug addiction. Because there's other countries where they've leaned, every other country where they've even leaned toward ending some of the repression of the drug laws, everything has gotten better after they've done it. Are you aware of what happened in Portugal? That Portugal decriminalized all drugs, right? In July of 2001. That's 8 years ago. Okay, so they got quite a record. And not only did they decriminalize all drugs, But they said you can have up to 10 days supply of your personal choice of drug and nobody's going to arrest you. You'd think that would cause a chaos, but exactly the opposite happened. Drug use for every category of drug went down, save one, which was marijuana, and it only increased slightly. And a study that was just done last May, published last May by Eric Greenwald on this thing, shows that where he compared the 8 years after Portugal decriminalized with the 8 years of all the other European countries that didn't decriminalize, and the other countries where they didn't decriminalize, marijuana use increased by 4 to 5 times the per capita rate it did in Portugal.
In the last 40 years?
Especially it dropped with the young people. Young people between the ages of 13 to 15, drug use declined by 25%. For people between the ages of 16 and 18, it's down 22%. Heroin overdose deaths are down 52% since they decriminalized. They're still using that same nasty heroin that they buy on the street that they don't know how much of it is really the drug and how much the cutting agent, which is what kills them, by the way. And that is not a function of the drug, that's a function of prohibition, because when you have prohibition, there's no control or regulation over how it's produced. So we could end all those. But they've cut overdose deaths by 52% because they no longer treat these people as criminals, because they treat them as people with a health problem, and they're not now afraid of taking a friend to a clinic when they're overdosing. So they're saving lives, see?